Mankind has always made beautiful things. To be human is to create. And some of the most compelling art in the world has been made by some of its poorest people. This work has fascinated Western travelers and artists throughout history, and it fascinates me. Can traditional art survive the modern world? I'm off to some of the remotest regions on Earth to find out. To West Africa to discover whether sacred art still has a meaning. To the isolated plains of northwest India to seek out astonishing textiles. But first, to the far side of the world, to remote islands between Australia and Papua New Guinea. If the headhunters were coming, what sort of man were they looking for? Here, art is bound up with secrecy and sorcery. I'm in search of a Victorian obsession. I want to find out how science changed our attitude to art. And I'm beginning here, in a small museum in Cambridge, with a marvellous, mysterious mask. It's made of turtle shell and metal and decorated with shells and feathers, and it comes from the Torres Strait Islands near Papua New Guinea. This object changed our attitude to tribal art. It has an immediate presence. It's scary, it's mysterious, it's full of excitement and energy, and to me, it has a certain powerful otherness. It seems to me to embody messages or purposes that I'm not sure that I completely understand. To the man who brought it here, such instantaneous reactions were simply not enough. He wanted to know precisely what it was. Alfred Court Haddon was a biologist by training. To him, it was not enough to simply admire a curiosity or to guess at its function. He wanted to understand the culture that created it. In the late 19th century, that was a radical idea. And in 1898, he sailed 9,000 miles to the Torres Strait Islands to seek answers. Haddon led the first explicitly anthropological field trip to try to make a complete record of a remote and unusually creative people. Curator Anita Hurley explains how it worked.
And here we have what is effectively the contract in which you see each of the expedition members have signed, saying that anything collected within that sphere belongs to the University of Cambridge as the main sponsor for the expedition. And it's those men that you see there.
But essentially, although it's a scientific expedition, what this looks like to me is something that Captain Kidd might have drawn up. You know, look, so look, we're all going to sign here, and here's our handwritten contract. And look, there's the treasure map.
Haddon collected hundreds of objects.
So this is a canoe prow ornament. It would have been attached to the front of a canoe, and you can see its pearl shell eyes that would, of course, help very much in navigation.
But everything was faithfully investigated.
Haddon himself was a very good draftsman, and this is a dance that was performed. And here is one of the ornaments that is depicted in this drawing. So after this dance, Haddon traded for these objects. Beautiful little sculpture of a dugong, the sea cow. You see the little bit of blue in the eye. It's probably washing powder that was incorporated into artworks.
This is the book that Alfred Court Haddon wrote about his adventures, and it's called Headhunters, Black, White and Brown. And of course, he was the white headhunter. One of the things he did was go collecting skulls. I want to find out what he actually discovered about primitive art, as he shamelessly called it. And I also wonder if I and find out the real meaning, the real purpose of that mask for the islands today. To do that, I start in the city of Cairns in the far north of Queensland, Australia. And I run straight into Fusion Australia. Italians, Greeks, quite a lot of England, China in force, and Thais. Dozens of races blended into a new pick-and-mix society. But what about the original inhabitants? In fact, there are two indigenous peoples who lived in this country for thousands of years before the Europeans arrived. Aboriginal people and the Torres Strait Islanders. The islands are 500 miles to the north of Cairns, but a lot of the population now lives in big cities like this. So before I go out to the Torres Strait, I go to the Cairns suburbs to meet a celebrated artist who came to the mainland quite recently, Alec Tipoti. I found you.
Welcome to my house.
Alec's art is based in the myths and legends of his people, often expressed in lino cuts.
This one is based on the legend of Kuyam, one of the most famous headhunters in the Torres Strait. It's a headhunting story. People from the island of Mabuyag, where my ancestors are from, we feel proud of, Kuyam, the headhunter.
Right. Okay, and look here, all the skulls underneath.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued to find that there still seems to be a tradition of mask making. Have you been influenced by the traditional masks that you've seen?
The one and only thing that inspired me to do it was the ancient mask that you would have seen. The curving of the nose of the turtle shell, how they molded back then. And the eyebrows or the eyelashes, the babe, I actually made that one up. I added that on.
So there's an element of scariness in the mask.
Yes. In our language, we say, Baibia apia nagika, which means you look under your eyebrows to give that scariness. The actual mask, they were used for rituals, for sacred ceremonies. It's almost like when you connect with the spirits, with the ancestors, you're dancing with your eyes closed, your mind separates from your body. This is one of my carvings. I only carve this one at night.
Yeah.
I acknowledge my ancestral spirits to guide my hand, so I'm more focused at night. It's different when I'm here in the Australian mainland because I am connected, but not as strong as if I was on the islands. And when I'm on the islands, I do feel the spirit's presence while I'm working. Yep.
Alec is pretty unequivocal. His island ancestor spirits take part in his creative process. And it feels like time for me to go there. We're heading out to the tip of Cape York, the very northernmost point of the Australian mainland. Well, there goes the road anyway. We're now on a great red strip of dust just stretches ahead of us through a fascinating bit of bush, actually, where even the insects make art. They're termite mounds. Well, here I am on the northernmost point of mainland Australia. And the point, as far as I'm concerned, is the word mainland, because there's a strait that runs about 100 miles wide between here and Papua New Guinea. And that is officially still part of Australia. Now, before the white man ever arrived and made these artificial distinctions, there was another distinction, because back there in Australia, that's the land of the Aboriginal people, but out there were different people altogether, the Torres Strait Islander people. And it's out there that I need to go if I want to find out more about that mask. It was a fascinating culture, spread out over a huge area. But today, only 18 of the 100 or so Torres Strait Islands are still inhabited. I'm heading first for Thursday Island, Just under 2 miles long, it's the modern administrative centre of the strait. The total population today is about 8,000. That's 5,000 more than when Haddon came here. It's a disarmingly suburban place. It wasn't always so. After first contact in the 1600s, there was no real connection between the islanders and Europeans for 250 years. But with the discovery of a valuable natural resource, the rest of the planet came hunting for treasure.
The search was on for pearl shell, because every lady and gentleman in the civilised world, as Haddon would have had it, wanted to do up their dress or their shirt with a pearl button. And the pearl shell was fished around here.
The nacre, as it was called, was gathered from the miles of nearby reefs. But it brought drink, disease and lawlessness. Alfred Court Haddon specifically wanted to find out how much of the original headhunter culture could survive this tidal wave of modernity. And how about today? Do any of the old traditions survive amongst the new rituals of an Australian weekend?
Hello, my friend. Good to see you again.
Back on the islands, Alec Tepotti has invited me to join him in a ceremony that will show how the old and new cultures have fused. This is the unveiling of his parents' tombstones. It's an important island ritual, starting with the call of the conch shell. There are traditional language songs in the procession and Christian hymns at the tomb.
To God the Father, to whom we pray, God the Son, to whom we pray, God the Holy Spirit, to whom we pray.
Alec is honouring his parents with elaborately carved and decorated tombstones which are now unveiled some years after their deaths.
Lenya Sochikochi, Argan Desai, Buai Kulka, descendant bloodline. He came from a line of artists who were known for their respect and humbleness.
The monument records the events of a life, but also a lineage. Everyone has a totem derived from the natural world and related to their clan. Alec's father's sacred symbol is the stingray. His mother's is the crocodile.
Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Although it's obviously clearly very Christian, it's also deeply Torres Strait Island. You feel that you're... I thought to myself as I stood there, I thought, I'm witnessing something that has its origins way before any Westerner came sailing in their ships 400 years ago.
And that evening, there's dancing. It invokes the spirit of legendary ancestors. And the mild-mannered artist that I've met is transformed into a warlike hero. Meanwhile, a massive feast is being protected from flies with an island lullaby.
What's that song about?
Just describe the beauty as the moon comes up.
And with all the lovely ladies on the beach, I'm told.
Yeah, that's us.
What's this?
Dugong.
This is dugong.
Yeah, dugong.
It's been described to me as being like the beef of the island. It's the sea cow, and it tastes like meat, and it does taste like meat. It tastes a bit like pork. Yeah, sort of halfway between pork and chicken. Delicious.
I'm eating manatee, sea cow. It's a traditional food here, and it features in feasts and in art. The traditional islander was always dependent on the natural world. I'm leaving suburban Thursday, going on out to Badi to get closer to true island life myself, just as Haddon did in the past. People here needed to survive within a difficult and capricious environment. They had to know it and respect it, and they worshipped it. They've always hunted dugong and turtle and crayfish. Technology may have changed, but the skills are still hard won.
You don't pull the rubber until you see the crate swimming, and you must be me, not the crate.
Suitably instructed, I failed to catch anything at all. Luckily, Johnny knows what he's doing. Turtle hunting lies deep within the island identity.
What we're watching here is part of a traditional hunting rights that the Torres Strait Island people have. They have to have a license, but they're free to catch turtle and dugong, catch them and eat them for their own consumption. And this magnificent turtle has been hunted for the last 2,000-3,000 years.
Then and now, in a sustainable way. But this was never an easy life. So the spirits of the natural world were needed to help. And in the past, they were brought into play using art. This drum was made about 150 years ago.
This head here, this face, represents, some people believe, a shark. You can see the eyes, and you can see the decorative carving here. Except that it wasn't decorative. It was in this making here that the zogo, the magic, the power of the drum lay.
Other sacred art does survive on the island, and I want to see it. But first I need permission. And the elders of the island want to check me out.
We have heard that there is ancient rock art on the island. And as part of my story, obviously, I would like to film some of that art.
It
doesn't look as if it's going well.
They say no, they don't want to show it to the outside world.
Why won't they show it to the outside world?
Well, you're talking to us now,
yeah,
and this thing will be, say, mountains be all over England. See, we try to keep this place as it is. We don't want people to come here. Because wherever white people been to whatever island, it just...
You got to realize that you asking us to reveal the most inner secret of our ancestry. All I can say to you is, in your world, what Shakespeare said, to be or not to be, that was the question he asked. And that's the same question we're asking you. We try to keep our things close to our hearts.
When Victorian scientist Alfred Haddon came to these islands, he had his problems too.
Haddon had months. Sometimes he was told to wait, and he did wait, in order to get to see or to be given things. And once bitten, twice shy, there's a sense here that people are very anxious not to lose any more things on this island and to keep secrets.
But I am allowed to witness the elders gathered on the beach for a serious business. Artist George Nona is bringing his copy of an ancient headdress onto the island.
And clearly it's a lot more than just a reproduction of an ancient artifact.
The headdress is a work of art. but one with complicated associations. It's a thing of magic and significance, far more than any casual observer would imagine.
This headdress have a great purpose for come back to this place where we're standing at right now. This signifies the major totems that were gods to our ancestors. Tupmul, which is File Ray, cousin to Stingray family. Ear of a dog. And Mipai, which is the back of a crocodile. Badu is 3 different
clans.
This was the Kuiku Mabai, the headsman, general, you might say, in army. This was his dari.
Is it appropriate for you to show me how it would have been worn as a headdress?
No, this is... To use this, you understand the World War IX.
Okay. Once, these people were warriors. The islanders were headhunters, frequently at war with their neighbours. The art of the headdress has continually evolved. And 60 years ago, they absorbed new influences.
These ones?
When were they made?
Now, this dance was created for the World War II when Japanese came over, tried to invade Australia, and conflict happened over Thursday Island, and the islanders put that into a dance. That's a kidiok. This is a bomber.
That's a fantastic.
That's a bomber.
It's great. Let me just try it on. Just not the easiest thing to dance with, I can imagine. Okay.
Don't fly off with it.
I won't, no. But this is also a new form of art of the island.
Turtle shell masks. Now, when you perform turtle shell mask dance, you link up with yourself in another realm with your gods.
So by wearing this mask in a dance, often...
I won't go into that.
No.
I won't go into that.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Sorry.
Dance involves headdresses and also masks. But George won't tell me any more. There is a lot of taboo here. The Tempest was written about 8 years after these islands were first visited by Juan Torres. The play presents an island full of spirits and spells. Well, you can rely on Shakespeare because he got it absolutely right. This was Prospero's island. There was magic everywhere. It was full of spells and sorcery. It was, for example, impossible to die, either from sickness or old age, without someone, somewhere, being responsible for it by casting a spell. This often resulted in headhunter raids to get payback. And these islands were divided one against the other, with many secrets and forbidden areas. But at least one taboo is set aside for me. Eventually, the elders did allow me to see the less sacred of their ancestors' rock art. It's hidden away in the middle of the island. And down here, look, that's a dugong. Very plain to see, dark shape of it, as you might see it in the water. Now, this is clearly a canoe here, isn't it? There's the prow of the canoe, and there's the people aboard. So, George, tell me about this canoe, because the markings on it are quite elaborate, aren't they?
Headhunting canoes. Headhunting canoes would be very similar, which have cassowary feathers and stuff like that they put up on this canoe.
What do you know about the headhunters?
Black magic played a role in there as well, witchcraft.
Here on Badu, they needed wood to make canoes, war canoes, and they would pay for them with human heads.
Heads, exactly.
If the headhunters were coming, what sort of man were they looking for?
It's not just any head. It has to be a special head. And if I can just use an example, there's one of us here with us today that has that head on.
Okay. Who's got that head?
Okay, there's a difference between a normal head and his head. His head is an expensive head
because he's being a smartass.
No, I'm not being a smartass. The head has to be special, like laying back type of thing. See how his head lays back? His head is very valuable. I can take his head and trade it for a canoe. And all the other heads I can destroy it under a cave.
On Badu, they were the toughest, worst headhunters in the whole of the Torres Strait Islands, weren't they?
Yes, they were. But I'm talking about...
That's why this head shape survived.
So the trade was in heads. If you've got a European head like mine, is that sloping at all in any way?
No, your head will be thrown out the back door.
Okay.
Because it's not worth anything.
No, some consolation, so they wouldn't come racing after me first.
They will take yours out because you're a white fella.
Okay.
Sorry.
To be a headhunter was to lead an anxious way of life. And the spirits of nature, as well as the spirits of your ancestors, had to be constantly appeased. Haddon came here to find out how all this magic and mayhem influenced the making of objects and idols. And now my journey is going to follow his, as he travelled to the distant Eastern Islands. The plains are small.
Could I get you to jump on the scales for me?
Right. Do I take this with me?
Hang on to that. Everything on the aircraft needs to be weighed.
I see, okay.
Thank you very much.
Good. And what happens if you're overweight?
Probably have to take some baggage off.
I see. Okay. My first stop in the Eastern Islands is Erub, or Darnley, to use its colonial name. There are no tourists here, and the only place that visitors can stay on the island is at Nora's. Hi, I'm Griff.
I'm Nora.
Hello, Nora. Nice to meet you.
And how's the trip? Good? You
It was good, very good, yes.
You know, today the wind started to drop. Sometimes you can get your reception out here.
On the mobile phone?
Yeah.
But I haven't come here to talk to too many people at home. I've come here to talk to people on the island. Later on, we're going to see some dancing.
Dancing down there.
Yeah.
My great-grandson dancing too.
Okay.
Come on, boys.
Nora takes me to meet her friends and to watch the kids rehearse for a Torres Strait Islands dance festival. Alfred Haddon's investigations included dance, and with the brand new technology of film, he took the first ever ethnographic footage. On a wax cylinder, he also recorded the Torres Strait Islanders' songs and stories. Like Haddon, I realise that this is more than performance. These are lessons. This dance tells of the need to sweep the village clean. I'm fascinated by the fact that that is a story as well.
Everything got a story. Yeah. Most of the songs tell you about the wind, about the sea, when the time to plant.
And when to look up at the Southern Star system for navigation. Here the kids are using dance ornaments, just like the ones I saw in the museum, but in their proper context.
You can learn from that song because it tells you what you're supposed to do in that island way of living.
And this is a boys' dance.
Boys dance always very aggressive.
Are they?
When we were younger, when we looked for a husband, we looked for the best dancers. We don't look for the man with a big house. No, you know what? It's the dancers is how they lift their legs up. The higher the legs come up, the better.
At the local arts centre, I discover that Haddon's own drawings of traditional ornaments are the inspiration.
As you can see, it's all over, like we've used it in every designs.
Yeah. So you're picking out designs which come from the tradition to use and then putting them into new ideas.
Yeah.
Look, these are the scarifications.
Yeah.
So these are sort of like body art, but they're not being preserved in any way, but in a way you're preserving them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like scarification design on bodies around little people.
I see.
That's racy.
The body markings may be gone, but other island traditions survive.
And that's my in-law.
You can't introduce me to?
No, I can't introduce you to her because she's my sister-in-law. And it's a big custom thing, like you sort of respect that. Like for me, I can't call her name. It's sort of like, I don't know, a disgrace for myself.
Right. So it's a form of politeness.
Yeah,
you must
politeness,
not say.
respect.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it would be disrespectful of
It
you
will,
to use
will
her
be,
name.
and a big debt.
A big debt?
Yeah.
How would that debt
How
be?
I repay the debt is by getting her a gift.
Right.
Yeah.
Ella really didn't want to say her sister-in-law's name. There are still traditional social rules here. Ancient custom is far from dead. These so-called primitive people had all the arts. They danced, they told stories, and they made music. And they used their greatest creative powers, their art, to serve the highest forms of spiritual power, their gods. But I'm finding that many of these sacred things are not for the outside world, as Mark Waigana explains. So I'm told that there are drums which are sacred drums, magic drums. Is that true?
Yeah.
Why would that be a special drum then? Why is it sacred?
Because there's a special dance they do.
Yeah.
Like ceremonial dance.
Yeah.
And that drum money used for that purpose, that's all. No dancing or anything else.
Just for that one ceremony.
And when the ceremony on, you can take videos or anything like that. It's so sacred.
You're allowed to watch, but you're not allowed to record it or pass it on. This is a very smart drum up here then. Ah. It's powerful. What I'm trying to do by coming to the island is to find out more about the history of this mask here, which they keep in Cambridge. And it's an old mask.
Oh, this one's very old.
It's a turtle shell. So do people still do dances which use quite big masks like this?
No. Only over at Mir, not here on Darnley.
Yeah, not on Darnley. But if I went to Mir, I might find people who still involve quite elaborate
Like
masks.
if you're lucky, they'll show you the Malo one.
That's from the cult of Malo, isn't it? Yeah.
That's if you're very lucky, they'll show you.
I know that Marlow is a warrior spirit and part of a secret creation myth that Haddon uncovered. Although in a way, people look at this as being a sort of Garden of Eden, a very simple life, what's also immediately apparent is that psychologically and hierarchically, if I can use that phrase, it's extremely complicated. That the relationships between people are complicated. The use of magic and religion and the number of spirits are extremely complicated. You can see why Haddon and anthropologists are deeply attracted to islands like this. Nora, well, we're off now. Now we're going to Mer next.
When you go to sleep at night, just talk to the spirit. Or you want to have a good sleep.
I'll have bad dreams.
You can hear knocking on the door and slam and, door slam and freeze. You won't see them as spirit. They're there. Just tell them, give us a good night's sleep and look after us and give us a safe journey.
Okay. Thank you.
Here you are. And this is yours and for your wife.
Thank you.
If you're naughty, she's going to belt you with that.
Shit, this will get worn down. There won't be any of it left by the end of the week.
I'll see.
Before I leave Nora's island of Ereb, one last stop on a beach next to the airstrip, where these old island spirits met a significant challenge 140 years ago. On July the 1st, 1871, a momentous landing took place on this beach here, deserted corner of Ereb, because the London Missionary Society arrived in order to convert the Torres Strait Islanders. They'd come in a ship called the Surprise. The British-led missionaries, many of whom were in fact from Fiji and Samoa, came to these islands with a fierce evangelical purpose: to bring light into darkness. And the old spirit world seemed to retreat almost immediately, partly because a chief who resisted the new teaching suddenly died. For the missionaries, the bad spirits were embodied in the old gods, in the carvings, the masks and the charms, and they decided to burn this heathen art, to destroy false idols. This was actually a major reason why Alfred Court Haddon came here. He wanted to save what he could of this threatened world. Haddon visited many islands, but centred his researches on Mur, or Murray, the furthest east of the Torres Strait Islands, close to the Barrier Reef, and where I hope to meet people with a direct connection to his voyage.
Flightwatch 6610, Whiskey Zilla Juliet, landed Murray Island.
Haddon had come here first in 1888 as a marine biologist to study the famous coral reefs, and he saw the effects of the missionaries on the inhabitants. So 10 years after that first visit, he came back as one of the founders of the new science of anthropology, to study human evolution instead. Haddon had to gain the islanders' trust, and he did this partly with a magic lantern show. He showed some glass slide photographs he'd taken of them a decade earlier.
This is a picture taken by Haddon of people who he said would dress up in their traditional dress, and they're wearing the headdresses.
That's my grandfather on the right there, great-grandfather, Pasi, and his cousin in the middle, Garodo.
Yeah.
But normally, when every photo taken by Haddon, them three always together, Pasi, Garodo, and Ulai, they were the best friend for Haddon during his expedition on Murray.
Fascinated by tradition he may have been, but Haddon was far from being a traditional European of his day. To him, the islanders were never the natives. They were his friends. He named them all individually in his reports. And he paid or traded for the objects, which were often hidden away from the missionaries. But he was no soft touch. He bought this charm, which was made to protect a crop, and the next day the village missed it. So the seller asked for it back, but Haddon stuck to his deal. He also realised that you can't look at objects in isolation, that you have to examine the lives, ceremonies and beliefs that created them.
This is called an adorned head. It's a powerful object, isn't it?
It's really interesting.
The objects he sought had specific functions, like this carving, used by men in love magic to make girls fall for them.
I just want to say, what you are trying to view here, it's really awesome and unique in a way that we as Murray Islanders have to be grateful, and I'm thankful of what Haddon did, because he preserved what was lost.
With so much apparently lost, Haddon now seems to be more of a hero than an imperialist raider. But after the slideshow, Siggy came to see me. He told me he had something to show me on the other side of the island.
We need to go around.
As far as I know, there isn't supposed to be any of the old-time stuff existing still on the island. It's not exactly that Haddon cleared it all away, but there's very little has survived. But Siggy has discovered some carved coral.
When the tide came through, all of a sudden we just found it.
Okay.
So that's the bird.
Yeah.
And didn't have a head.
This looks very similar to the more complete figures that Haddon collected. Am I okay to touch it? Oh, yeah. But here, there's the shape of a wing. And the head would have been up here. And down here, you've got the tail end. It's a bit like an oven-ready turkey, isn't it?
Yeah. Because I picked it up from my spot. He's sort of like a charm to me and protect my area.
A little spirit to look after the land.
Yes.
What Haddon was involved in this beautiful place was what's been called salvage ethnography. In other words, what he was trying to do was get information or save what was left of what he believed was a lost culture. That meant he tried to collect as much as he could of everything. He was eclectic, comprehensive. There wasn't a piece of creativity that passed him by, from children's games to garden gnomes. And that's because he believed it was going forever, that it would disappear. The missionaries would burn most of it, and modern life would eradicate the rest. Haddon took around 1,300 objects back to Britain, but I'm continuing to discover that he didn't get everything. John Barser shows me a rather marvellous thing that's been in his family for generations.
Who did this belong to?
This one was from my granddad.
From your granddad, and he
my great-granddad.
handed it down to you?
Yeah.
3 notches, 1 for each head hunted.
So those are the people that
He
you're...
killed 3 people with this. The fella get closer, they pull this out and whack.
I have a feel of it's got a fair old heft. I can imagine that would crush in somebody's skull.
So that's the one thing Adam didn't take from me. I keep this one.
I think you do.
Haddon didn't only collect artefacts. He also got his friends to resurrect some of the old dances and rituals before they disappeared. Except that they didn't. Every inflection, every movement, danced as it used to be danced, has its point. The intensity reflects the fact that these are dances recollecting mythical warriors.
So, John, what was the songs we had?
He's Leres and Punideres.
What does that mean?
It's mean he killed somebody and open your eyes.
Kill somebody and open your eyes.
Yeah.
Be a man, in fact.
Yeah.
And it's coming into focus for me. Although I've seen some of this earlier, I'm also realising that there is a strong warlike agenda here. That the arts and ceremonies are linked not just with the polite world of charms, but also with a darker business. Haddon used the word savage and savages as a term of approbation. He admired the fighting spirit.
We didn't see any masks in there, but would there be masks in a dance like that?
Oh, it's a different dance altogether. A different thing again.
Yeah, so if I'm looking to find the secret of my mask, I need to look for a different sort of dance.
Different dance.
A different ceremony.
Some ceremonies were not only hidden from the missionaries, but were deeply taboo for the islanders themselves. And this is where the masks had a special purpose. The fundamental beliefs of this island centre around a creation myth and a common warrior ancestor called Marlow, a god who took both human and animal form. Doug Passy has had to ask Sari for permission to visit one of the island's most sacred sites. It's on his family's land.
I'll jump at the back.
Be right there. All right. Thank you.
So what was that?
Permission granted.
We're okay.
We're okay to go.
Here we go.
And it turns out that they're taking me to the place where Marlow was first brought to the island.
This is the area. That's the birth of our former god Marlow.
All the young men on Mer were initiated into the cult of the god Marlow, and hence into manhood.
Before you become a warrior, you have to go to initiation. And normally they lie on the ground to become a warrior. That's the initiation.
So they're not stood up here, they're all lying
They're
on the
lying
ground,
down on the ground. And my great-grandfather drew this one.
And he drew it to help Haddon understand how the initiation happened.
Yes.
That's the first part.
Mm.
And that's the second one where they sit and watch, just dance around the boss.
My grandfather was second in command, I believe, to wear this mask.
Right.
And the picture that you saw before, they lie here on the front.
Nice.
And you got this mask coming in and just go like this. Initiate them. Now you become a warrior.
also a headhunter. Haddon discovered that masks were used to add a very powerful magic to secret ceremonies. And he got the old men to recreate this sacred forbidden Marlow ritual for his camera. And he asked them to make him cardboard replicas of the sacred masks. John Barser is making new masks today, still related to that cult of Marlow.
This fella here, it was like a watchdog for Marlow to the ceremony.
And they don't disturb the ceremony. So this one there was to come out and be a little bit like a watchdog. Yeah. Oh, I see. Like a shark watchdog. Yeah, good.
Yeah, that's why he got the face of a dog and the tail of a shark.
That's cool.
All right?
Yeah, fantastic. Masks have lost none of their potency for the islanders. In 1998, 100 years after the Haddon expedition, the Cambridge Museum invited representatives from 2 islands to visit Britain. Councillor Ron Day, descended from another of Haddon's helpers, had a strange experience. Now, do you remember how you felt when you went to Cambridge that time?
Well, obviously pretty emotional. We walked into the museum, and there were the masks inside a glass cage. As we walked in, we see the mask spin around. Yep, the mask spun, and I said to my colleague, "There's no wind in here." And then it stopped, and I said to them, people, they're glad to see us. They're happy to see us. They're probably thinking that we're here to take them back home, but we're not.
Ron's masks, however, came from Mer and these eastern islands. What of the other mask? The one that prompted my journey? This mask, I've been told, was made in the Western Islands.
Well, I think so too, because it's different from our masks. Changes personality. You don't use these for ceremonies that you have fun out of them. It's a serious business.
So this is not...
It's not a mask that you would play around.
No. Okay, so once this mask goes on, we're talking serious stuff.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, Christianity trying to put that Jesus as an in-between person between God and man. Same analogy. It's very important, it's sacred, it's powerful.
What Ron has told me is that by putting on a mask, a man becomes a demigod. It's the magic of transubstantiation. No wonder these masks have to be treated with such respect. But to find our mask's exact purposes, I have to go to the distant island of Mobiag. There's always another island stepping further out across that blue sea. But this is Mobiag. And the man who made our mask came from this island. He gave it to Haddon on Nagia, which is now uninhabited and out there. Haddon spent his last month in the Torres Strait Islands in this place. Haddon found that the fear of the missionaries had meant that the old beliefs in savage gods and headhunter heroes like the fierce warrior Quiam had gone underground. But today, things are less hidden away. Even the kids in the town square are well versed in the old legends.
Quiam, when he went to walk, he's saying like, Ngai surka, ngai kewe.
What does that mean?
Like, I'm not scared.
All right.
I'm very brave. They said there is Quiam's house on the hill and there's a mask.
Is there?
A mask in there too.
A secret mask?
Yeah. But he eats under the grave.
Right.
He eats under the grave. It was like a Gugu. It was like
Quiam's right-hand man was Gugu, who wore an owl-shaped mask.
eyes, big and We
I
never
see.
seen his face before.
Oh, I see. So,
only when he was little. Yeah. If
Yeah.
anybody grabs the mask,
They're gonna have
Google
curses and
curses and like a spell on you, like.
so is it safe to draw the mask like this?
Yeah, but you can't touch it. Every night at like dead 12, and you sing a sacred song, he
Yes.
comes up and dance. Well done. Although Haddon was always very keen to stress the fellow humanity of the Torres Strait Islanders, there's absolutely no doubt that he was also drawn to the strangeness, the uniqueness of their culture. He was taken to see the remains of the quad, where young men would be kept apart from women until they were initiated into the ways of the warrior. He was actually shown the stone that was used to beat 5 boys to death who had run away to see their mothers. And apparently that quad still exists. Signet Repu is a guardian of the island's culture and has agreed to show me where it is. Bones from past feasts create an eerie sacred mound.
This is where the chiefs of the clan sit, and the most powerful sorcerers in the village.
And they would meet here, and if any woman was foolish enough to come here,
killed.
they were killed, yes.
Yeah. Even the husbands kill their own wives.
Right.
Because of trespassing taboo and yeah.
Okay. So you don't have quads, you don't have areas where just the men sit anymore, do you?
No, we still do, and they are now called justice systems in the local government.
Are they? Despite this obvious violence, Haddon never saw the islanders as barbarous. This was a time of rampant racial evolutionary theory, but Haddon insisted that his study of islanders showed that differences in mental character and acuteness of the senses between the civilized and the uncivilized people are a result of environment and individual variability. In other words, there is no such thing as racial superiority. And this requires us to look at their artwork, not as wild, savage, childish, or brutal, but shot through with sophisticated meaning and as many theological references as a medieval icon. There are many different gods and beliefs here, but I discover that Mobiag is the home of one potent myth. It recounts the relationship between man and the wild. Uberi Kuberi was a crocodile kept as a pet, given by a warrior to his daughter. But as Uberi Kuberi grew, one day she forgot to feed it, so it took her father. Every child on the island knows the story.
Uberi Kuberi came and splashed him in and killed him. And the daughter said, "Bring up my dad." Then the crocodile went down. They came up with the father on top of the back, dead.
But later that evening, it is Signet who is able to tell me the real significance of the crocodile to the island and exactly how it relates to the mask that Haddon carried back to Cambridge.
The totem here at Mabuyag is Uberi Kuberi, this great ancestor crocodile.
That's the mask.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell me about that?
This kind of masks is usually used at death dances, rituals concerning spirits, and the dancer who wears that mask is the best dancer. The crocodile represents Uberi Kuberi, and the human face up on the top there represents the deceased. Sort of compares the story of Uberi Kuberi with the deceased.
Do you know the people who were there?
I do. The one sitting is Grandfather Gizu.
Signet explained that it was Gizu himself who made the mask, especially for Haddon.
And this is the only part of the spirituality and the sacredness of the island that he was allowed to take away, because it was made a new piece of artifact.
It was a new mask, and therefore safe enough to leave the island. Its original would have been used in the most sacred rite of all, for funerals, to combat the great mystery of death itself. Before leaving Mobiag, I go to meet Uberi Kuberi's direct descendant. A semi-tame crocodile named Dammy Dammy lives in a pond by the airstrip.
There she is. She's come here to watch the aeroplane land. In the hope that the aeroplane's going to skid off and she'll get a good, proper breakfast. But that's the aeroplane that's going to take me away. I've come a little distance away from Dammy Dammy, on the understanding that there's no such thing as a tame crocodile. That's, I suppose, one of the moral stories involved in the story of Uberi Kuberi and the story of the mask.
The powerful totem of the crocodile and the myth of Uberi Kuberi is not only alive on the island, it's alive in contemporary Torres Strait culture and art. Today's art is rooted in the traditional beliefs of the islands. It's nurtured in it. The power, the magic, the Zogo are all still present. And dealers come from around the world to the Cairns Indigenous Art Fair to buy and to collect. One of the most acclaimed contemporary artists, Dennis Nona, has used the crocodile myth to make lino prints, and also this, his most ambitious piece.
This is a story of Uberi Kuberi.
So this is the same story
Yes.
as the story of the mask?
Yes, it was to remind the crocodile people of their totem.
Their origins?
Yes.
And their connection with the crocodile totem?
Yes.
Why is the new art of the Torres Strait Islands so successful? Alec Tipotti's magnificent lino print of the head-hunting hero, Guyan. George Nona's headdresses. John Barser's new turtle shell masks. Dance headgear, sculpture, ceramics, weaving. There's a fierce psychological and spiritual depth to contemporary Torres Strait Island art. What I respect the scientist Alfred Cord Haddon for is asserting that the art that they produce was never merely decorative. What it embodied was all the mystery and difficulty of their beliefs. That it's psychologically challenging and full of Zogo magic. What I think Haddon would be rather amazed and probably hugely delighted to discover is that those beliefs survive, and that the Torres Strait Island people are still a hugely creative people, and the work that they make is invested with power and with directness and with energy from precisely the beliefs that he feared were disappearing. Next week, I'll be in West Africa, amongst the Dogon people and their astounding art.
Off on a great British Railway journey here on BBC HT Tonight at midnight. And coming up next, it's EastEnders.